I believe that this country's policies should be heavily biased in favor of non-discrimination. I believe when you tell people they can't do certain things in this country that other people can do, there ought to be an overwhelming and compelling reason for it.
Hi, my name is Bonche Ogburn. My pronouns are she and her.
My name is Thomas Edmond. I'm nicknamed and affectionately known as Randy, which is a derivative of my middle name. And my personal pronouns are he, him, and his.
My name is Javier Antella. I actually don't have any pronouns.
The armed forces that I served in was the United States Air Force. I was in the military from July 1st of 1983 to like November 20th, 1985. Yeah. To be quite honest with you, I didn't want to go in the military. It was something that my father kind of pushed me into while I was still in high school. We were talking about me going to college, and I guess there was some misunderstanding that they were going to send me away. I wanted to go to RPI, but I guess my parents and I, particularly my father, we had a little bit of a misunderstanding as to where I was going to go to school, and the conversation kind of went south a little bit, and then my father ended up, out of frustration, ended up pushing me toward the military. I looked at all four of the branches and ended up choosing the Air Force on delayed entry. I had to finish my senior year in high school. I was enlisted, but on delayed entry. My senior year in high school, they put me on delayed entries for me to finish my senior year, and then 1 week after I graduated, off I went. I was gone. No summer at all after I graduated. None.
So I serve in the Army National Guard full time. I joined back in 2016. And what made me want to join is because I had my son young. I had my son at the age of 14. So I wanted to create a life that was stable for him. So I joined the military.
So I was in the U.S. Navy from 1990 through 2008. With a couple years break in service, I went from active duty to reserves. And what made me want to join, believe it or not, it was to get just for the benefits and whatnot. Because at that time, 1990, the Cold War had ended, and so we thought we were going to be in peacetime and whatever. And foolish for me to think that, because what happened was that right after George Bush Sr. was about to give the office to Bill Clinton, the last thing that he did was to sign a declaration of war, and that was the Persian Gulf War.
The policy I am announcing today is, in my judgment, the right thing to do and the best way to do it. It is right because it provides greater protection to those who happen to be homosexual and want to serve their country honorably in uniform, obeying all the military's rules against sexual misconduct. It is the best way to proceed because it provides a sensible balance between the rights of the individual and the needs of our military to remain the world's #1 fighting force.
The President consulted with his Joint Chiefs of Staff and indicated to us, as the President of all Americans and as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, that he wanted to modify this policy. And he asked us to go study it. He didn't change it on the spot. He asked us to go study it with a goal toward showing a little more flexibility with respect to that policy.
When I was in the military, the HIV and AIDS, all that was pretty much just hitting the media. I'm not going to say that it was just out here, because HIV and AIDS has been here on planet for fucking ever. But when I was in the military in the early to mid 80s, that was just becoming out into the forefront of the media with Magic Johnson and all of that was going on, because that's, you know, and it was called the gay disease and all of that back then. But straight people were also contracting it, and you know, it was just a whole lot going on with it. It was sort of like the way they're seeing the you know how the monkeypox thing, where they assigned it to men who were sleeping with men, but anybody could get it. It was sort of like that. It was sort of like that back then. And when I went to the military, you know, I was still, you know, doing my internal battle with my own sexuality back and forth, because I was only 18. I was 18, hadn't been with anybody, man, woman, or anyone yet. I was a virgin. All throughout school, high school, I was a virgin. Athletic, cool, you know, got along with people, everything, but I was a virgin, bottom line. And at 18, I went in the military, fighting with sexuality, this, that, you know, I was, you know, with that, oh, it's wrong, you can't be with a man, you're this, that, and, you know, you weren't raised that way, and, you know, I hadn't been with a woman yet. It was just a battle that I was going through. So when I finally got into the military, when I was finally able to experience some type of sexual freedom, I had girlfriends first. I mean, and even in high school, I went to my senior prom and all like that, but, you know, but like I said, it was a different time, you know, and you couldn't really show anybody that you were gay and all like that. So anyway, I had girlfriends at first when I was in the military, and, you know, I had a few girlfriends. But to me, now this is just to me, and maybe I'm even wrong about this, but the way I was seeing it for myself, I was sleeping with these women to resist what was really going on with me, to fight against what. I hadn't been with a woman. I was curious. I wanted to try to make that work, because to be honest, I didn't want to be gay. It was that time where, you know, it was just so wrong for you to be even considered that. And they had just went through this, what was it, the Stonewall? Stonehenge, I'm sorry. They just went through the Stonehenge thing. That was all, you know. So it was just a lot. And when you were like, when you knew you were gay then, you just didn't say anything. You just continued on and just tried to be who you were. And not that I really had any effeminate qualities, but I knew on the inside that I was attracted to men. You know, effeminate qualities or whatever side, whatever the fuck you want to call it. You know, I just had that attraction. So after, I guess, you know, I tried, and one day I just gave in. I gave in, and I experimented with another airman who was in the military. You know, he and I, you know, and it was an experimentation thing, and we were just quiet about it, completely quiet about it, never said anything, because on base, I had a reputation of having girlfriends. It's that nobody really knew what I was doing. And that's the way you had to keep it. You had to keep it that way, because if they found out, they'd throw you out.
The very beginning of it all, I wasn't even out. I was married to a woman, and that was for the first, I would say, like the first 6 years, give or take. I was deeply closeted. I was having marital problems with my wife. None of that having to do directly with my sexuality or anything like that. But she decided at some point that that's it. We're going to be done, and she kind of like walked out of my life. So what happened afterwards was I was 2.5 years. We were separated. This was right after my son was born, by the way. And in that 2.5 year period, I kind of like found out who I was. I had the space and the freedom to investigate, to kind of learn who I was and whatever. And then at some point she wanted to come back. She wanted to not necessarily reconcile. Her situation at the time was that she needed the health benefits, and if we got divorced, she would lose my military health benefits as a spouse. So she wanted to come back for that, and I was very much no, sorry, I am not swinging that way anymore. So we're not gonna revisit this. So in a fit of anger, she went and she outed me to my military command. That backfired on her because my commanders were this was during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which Bill Clinton put into play. And so even though she had come to them and she had accused me of being a homosexual and so on and so forth, they actually did an investigation. So I was sat down in an office in front of my admiral, my lieutenant, the person that I directly reported to, my chief in my office, and there was like all of these people, and so I'm sitting in this office and I'm just sweating, I'm shitting bricks because I've never been called into the admiral's office before. So here we were, and they said, okay, so your ex-wife or wife, because we were still married at the time, we were just separated. She was like, she came in and she said this and this and this and this, and so we just want you to kind of speak for yourself. And I don't actually even remember what I said, but I was like, look, we're not together anymore. She walked out on me, and she wants back in. I kind of told him, she wants back in, and I'm kind of done with that. So they were like, well, we understand that on a performance level, you're super, you're attentive, you're always on time, and whatever. And the most important thing that they said was that whatever you got going on, you always leave your baggage at the door. So I come into work super professional, and I get the job done, and that's all they really cared about. So they kind of chalked it up to her just being a bitter, estranged wife, right? So that was that. So that backfired on her. When she wasn't able to get me kicked out of the military, she outed me to my family, and she did so in a very public, very disgusting kind of way, because my parents owned a restaurant in Miami, and she walked into the restaurant and she made a full-on show in front of customers and everything. No, because because Javier's a faggot and this, that, and the other, whatever, like in Spanish, obviously. But yeah, it was a whole thing. And then my mom was like, you know what? Because my mom didn't like my ex-wife. So she was like, I prefer for you to be gay than to have been married to her.
My experience has been pretty good for the most part. I'd say what it is that so I put the B in the LGBTQ community. So for me, it's always been, whether outside of the military or inside of the military, it's almost fetishized And so it's looked at as like a kink. So I've had sometimes like my male counterparts hit on me in that regard, to try to get a scoop on what that's like and, you know, how that is for me, because they don't really understand how that works. And so that's been a lot of my experience, like having to kind of like defend my sexuality, because a lot of people don't believe that you can be bisexual. And on the flip side, I am like often like thrown into conversations regarding the LGBTQ community. And so I'm constantly in those types of arguments or debates or just conversations that have to do with, I don't understand pronouns, and I don't understand you know, being transgender and things of that nature. So I don't have to deal with that personally, but I'm constantly in those types of conversations about that, because there are a lot of I believe just, you know, males who are straight and don't understand. But I've never really been, I guess I would say mistreated per se, but I've had to kind of manage my lifestyle because of the fact that when I joined, I was with another woman. So when it came to legalities, for them to recognize her as another parent in his life, because we weren't married, but that was still my partner. And so that would be some kind of a battle per se, because they didn't recognize her as a parent because it was a 2-woman relationship. But overall, I would say that my experience being in the military has been pretty good. I haven't had any types of, you know, bullying or anything, or had to fear for my life. For the most part, all of the environments that I worked in. At one point, I even had a fully LGBTQ team where my commander was LGBTQ and my XO. So those are 2 officer positions that typically aren't filled by women, and for them to both be filled by women, and they were Latino women, and also a part of the LGBTQ community, was pretty awesome, and they were really awesome at their job. So that was a rare experience for me, being in the military, which is also a good one. So it kind of just shows you how the military is changing and being more acceptive and receptive to the community as a whole. And yeah, that's been my experience.
Go, hey, hey, go, ho, don't ask, don't tell, it's got to go, hey, hey, go, ho, don't ask, don't tell, it's got to go, okay, go, ho, don't ask, don't tell, it's got to go.
The notion that we're all created equal, that no matter who you are or what you look like, if you abide by the law, you should be protected by it. If you adhere to our common values, you should be treated no different than anyone else. We must continually renew this promise. This year, I will work with Congress and our military to finally repeal the law that denies gay Americans the right to serve the country they love because of who they are. It's the right thing to do.
The mandate of this working group is to thoroughly, objectively, and methodically examine all aspects of this question and produce its finding and recommendations in the form of an implementation plan by the end of this calendar year.
I'm here because don't ask, don't tell is wrong. It's unjust. And fundamentally, it is against all that we stand for as Americans.
I continue to urge my colleagues to reject this effort to short-circuit the process endorsed by Department of Defense leaders, not by the service chiefs, a process that was supposed to inform us with one that merely ratifies a politically driven decision. It would be a mistake to ignore the views of our troops and the military advice of the service chiefs, and for the Senate to act prematurely to repeal the current Don't Ask, Don't Tell law for the sake of fulfilling a political promise.
Basically, it's ordering the military to suspend or discontinue any investigation, any discharge that was started under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. The Pentagon is right now compiling the results of a massive survey that they did of hundreds of thousands of troops, trying to gauge their opinions on it. And that's really what the Obama administration, Pentagon, are waiting for, December 1st, when they get those results back.
But in summary, a strong majority of those who answered the survey, more than 2/3, do not object to gays and lesbians serving openly in uniform. The findings suggest that for large segments of the military, repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, though potentially disruptive in the short term, would not be the wrenching, traumatic change that many have feared and predicted. The data also shows that within the combat arms specialties and units, there is a higher level of discontent, of discomfort, and resistance to changing the current policy. The majority of concerns often raised in association with the repeal, dealing with sexual conduct, fraternization, billeting arrangements, marital or survivor benefits, could be governed by existing laws and regulations. Existing policies can and should be applied equally to homosexuals as well as heterosexuals.